And joining us today on the Crypto Currently podcast, we have two representatives from the EOS tribe. Very excited to bring these guys to you because what little I know about what they're doing spells out quite a bit of what we talk about on this show, which is not just, you know, the evolution and the progression of technology and what that means to mankind, but also the importance of community through all of it. And so today we are joined by Steve and Eugene. Gentlemen, thank you for joining the Crypto Currently podcast.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, all right.
Thank you for having us.
You bet. We'll cut out that little gap there. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you okay.
Okay, so I'm very new to the EOS tribe, and I was made aware of you guys by one of the members of the community that I've built in the Crypto Currently podcast, affectionately known as the Crypto Creeps, one of the originals, Raleigh. Raleigh Felton was telling me about you guys, and I trust Raleigh. I've had many conversations with him one-on-one, and he's very excited about what you guys are doing there. Why don't you tell us what you guys are doing over there?
I'll let Eugene kind of kick off.
Eugene, break it down, brother.
So basically, EOS tribe, we are BP candidate for EOS, and our main goal is to secure, and make this launch of EOS blockchain success. We are working on security standards for in a group of BP candidates. It's a community effort. And so we are basically converging on a single strategy to launch EOS blockchain on June 2nd and make that launch, success and secure, and, to make sure the token holders will, benefit at the end. So that's our main goal.
Okay. Now you said
that's the action. Let me extend on that, because that's the actual, that's the mission as far as the job that we have to fulfill. But then there is why we do it.
Yes.
And a big part of that is, and for me and Eugene, was just being deliberate with the time that you have on this planet. And I always say that if you pay for your lifestyle or your job with the equity that is your life, your time,
yes.
Putting that time into things that matter, that are going to have a positive impact on the world and on people is, paramount, and that's
Absolutely.
essentially what motivated us to start EOS Tribe. We had other people, other block producer candidates kind of courting us, top BPs. I won't name any names, but just, some of the top names that you hear of in the space had individually at one time or another reached out to me and Eugene, hey, come join our camp, and we were starting to realize we're revered, people want to work with us, but, we want to do our own thing.
Yeah.
We don't want to be under someone else's umbrella. And
Right.
It just goes back to wow, we leave this big corporate job to go work in another corporate environment. It's independent, it's smaller, but it's still now we're under someone else's deal. And we just wanted to be our own, not be under someone else's umbrella, basically. So that's essentially what sparked, the tribe.
Now, what is that though? What are you trying to do? What is EOS? What is the tribe?
EOS, I'll let Eugene extend on what EOS is as a system. Yeah.
EOS is basically a new distributed proof of stake blockchain. As we all know, Bitcoin became a first concept, proof of concept, so to speak, and the first cryptocurrency that is using proof of work, and it has a limitation. It works, but it has a limitation of doing just 4 transactions per second. So it cannot scale to a financial demand that is required by mainstream. Ethereum is facing similar issues. It can go, I think, up to 30 transactions per second, which is still better, but it's nowhere close to Visa, which can do 2,000 transactions per second, right? So the distributed proof of stake solves this problem. And EOS blockchain will be the first one that actually launches a mainstream blockchain that will have that. And also, from the start, we will support at least 1,000 transactions per second. And
you said distributed proof of stake, it's delegated proof of stake.
It's a delegated proof of stake. Thank you for correcting me. And in the long run, as we go to a multi-threaded environment, we can potentially scale it up to 1 million transactions per second and go way above and beyond what is required by financial industry anytime soon, to cover all.
Let's translate that to something really simple that your end users could understand.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You will not, I just want to underline this, because when you explain that, it doesn't really come through to end users, people who are non-technical. You can't build the next Twitter or Facebook on Ethereum, like, period. Like, you will not build anything that will compete meaningfully with the big data monopolies and the big, walled gardens of Facebook and Twitter. You will not create a competitor of that on current blockchain stacks and platforms.
Okay.
You just will not. Like, no matter what you do, it will not support the throughput and the transactions. So the significance of EOS is that now you can. So yeah, welcome to the new decentralized web.
Okay, so EOS, and it's spelled out with capital letters, EOS. What does that stand for?
A lot of people say the enterprise operating system is what Sergey and others had mentioned, but it's taken on a life of its own. Like, everyone shares, there's a lot of hippie,
some Greek god or goddess.
Yeah.
Name. So, everybody interprets it any way you want it, but it's just a brand. It's just a name.
It's just a name.
Is it still the same concept though? Is it like you can't compete with Google, and Twitter, and YouTube, and Instagram and all that because
why can't
because they have acres and acres of processing units that and their own independent power source and is that why?
Not fully. That's part of the equation. Yes, they have the infrastructure, but they have the users. And the reason that they have the users is because they have the right incentive model that your grandma can wake up and dependably get a picture of her granddaughter on a certain time schedule and be able to see what's going on. So she knows, she's been trained to go to Facebook to look for those pieces of media. But what if we had a day where your grandma had passed on, your mom's getting on in her years now, and she's been using this new decentralized web for a while here and there. She used Steemit. She got her a Steemit account, and she made about $1,000 blogging about her tulips. You know what I'm saying? And now your mom's addicted to that because she cashed out that Steemit to get her a new dress. And before you know it, she's expecting, everything that comes with that incentive model, and if you look at that, if you weigh that out and say, okay, when you look at that trajectory over the next 10-year cycle of adoption, you start to see very succinctly that all the numbers for Facebook are waning. You've literally had a huge drop off, 20% or more, and just the last 3 or 4 months, and that's expected to decline more significantly.
Yeah. You can't do that to people and can hope to continue to keep their business.
So you look at that, you look at their ethics and what happened on that end, but you also look at the incentive model. The incentive model is very important to pay attention to, because this is why these systems don't work. Facebook and MySpace and all of them eventually degrade. Even ad platforms, this, that there's basically a logarithmic scale where it hits its peak and then it slowly starts to decay. In any platform, in any monetary system, in any system you can shake a stick at, this happens. There's a boom and a bust, and then there's a recovery. And people position around that financially, as a financial, as a person in the industry. So with that said, it's kind of a messy way to make the sausage, there's certainly probably more elegant ways that we have with cryptography and with these distributed ledgers to, let's play this scenario out in something practical. Let's say your daughter, she's 10 or 11 years old. She's got her first iPad, and she gets on this DApp called, crypto mooses or something. It's an evolution of crypto kitties. Who knows? You know what I mean? But now it's on EOS, and she plays this game, and instead of the game charging your card, it pays her this cryptocurrency.
Right.
specific to this particular platform. And you happen to do that too in a news style site called BitNews that you also do this. You have about 4 or 5 services that you use that are all blockchain based. And between all the time that you use to consume media and promote your shows and do everything that you do, between DLive and DTube and all these like blockchain based, apps that are competitors of YouTube, you actually make enough money from all of those interactions to put her through college and to pay basically a universal income. So you don't have to work all the time. You're not balling, but just from your day to day that you actually make enough money to pay all your debts and all the stuff that you need to do. Now, if you want to get rich, you need to go create intellectual property and new ideas into the market that you can monetize. But the fact that you could just monetize your actions now, well, that becomes a very powerful incentive model, both to secure the network that you're working on, because people want to do the right thing to get paid, because if you don't get paid. And then 2, it also becomes very powerful for, having a means to generate additional revenue for the things you already do. So that's the future that you are going to see in about 8 to 10 years, that you are going to see more widespread.
I would love that, because I see a lot of inefficiencies when it comes to, commodifying, likes and retweets and any sort of verifiable interactions like that. And I've said that numerous times before on the show, is that there's, like if you're on Facebook right now, and as a matter of fact, I said this on like yesterday's show, and I've said it many times, like, if you're on Facebook, if you're not selling something, then you are the product, right? And and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like I'm a big fan of capitalism, like no problem there, but there has to be a way to turn that table where it's like, like the way that Steam has addressed, not addressed it, but has begun to address that problem and at least offer a solution. Now, I love Steam it because I hate it so much. You know what I mean? It's clunky. I don't get it. I have to download some other stuff so that I can upload my podcast or my videos.
That's the adoption curve. What you're talking about is you're in the middle of the adoption curve, where you look at it and you see it's great that people are getting paid for these articles, but you don't know how the hell they're doing it. Right. You don't know why they're doing it. You don't know how it's weighted, and it just seems like a new system you have to figure out. You know what I mean?
That's exactly it.
Did you feel that way about 10 years ago with Facebook or MySpace? Remember when you first looked at it and you're like, screw this. Like, who cares? Like, this is so lame. Give me an AOL chat room. Like, just give me give me something simple. I don't want this big interface. Why do we need this? Like, I felt that way about MySpace. When I first saw MySpace, like, I thought it was stupid.
Oh, and listen to the listeners, because some of my listeners are, I've verified, some of them are under the age of 24. MySpace is a thing that used to be on the internet, all right? And you used to go there to chat with people you've never met before. It's kind of a long story. You can Google it. I'm sure there's a history of that thing somewhere.
That's how old. Yeah, that's crazy to think that the web is old enough.
That's an old thing.
Yeah, because that was relatively new to me. I was like, whoa, that's, it just happened. We're getting old.
I knew I was old. Recently, I was talking to a graduate student in Germany, and it was a Sunday morning at Starbucks, and he was still drunk, and he asked me a profound question, and he wasn't trying to be a douchebag, but he was asking me, like, because he could tell I was older. He's like, what was life like before the internet? And I sat there and I explained to him, and it's like, oh, that's right. Like, there's people alive and are not only cognizant, but they're in the working class now. They're grown-ups. They have children of their own.
No world. Yeah.
They don't know that world, right? And it's really kind of funny. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I was intrigued, because anytime there's an underdog or somebody that somebody else is going after, I'm always intrigued. It's like, oh, okay, what's going on over there? And I was watching one of the videos of a podcast that somebody in the EOS space had done, and he was saying that it's going to be inevitable that there's going to be groups of people that do not want the EOS, I don't know, design or whatever to work, and so that you're going to be attacked. He was talking about people attacking EOS, and that they wouldn't be. Do you know what I'm talking? Do you know the interview that I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
I know.
Eugene can extend on this.
So yeah, I may not know. There have been multiple interviews where this was discussed.
Can you tell me? Yeah, tell me why. Like why?
So obviously, you know, I know many projects, and one I'm being involved personally, where projects are migrating from Ethereum platform to EOS. Once EOS platform goes live, it has so much to offer in comparison to Ethereum. There will be a big exodus to EOS.
Okay.
So obviously, there are significant powers, right, in this world who have significant resources who stand to lose, you know, economically and financially if EOS is success,
Okay.
and vice versa, right? So
Right.
yes, EOS has lots of friends, but we got enemies too, which is, you know, expected. It's normal, and thus we have this discussion in the community. We have a more kind of younger, naive guys. Well, I wouldn't say younger, but some naive group who says, well, you know, security is hard. Let's just not pay attention to it. Let's just go live and hope for the best. And there are other groups like which I'm part of, which is saying, no, wait, guys. You know, we really have to take this seriously. We have to think through all the, you know, attack surface, DDoS attacks, any type of attacks that can be launched against us, because this is going to be a very public event. If we fall on our face, it's gonna be, trust me, it's gonna be advertised around the world that EOS is a failure, etc. Right? And it will have significant impact on the price of EOS, obviously, right? So we have to take it seriously, and our group have been advocating for this very, you know, approach to security, very solid. I have a background in IT. I worked for banking IT. I worked for Deutsche Bank. I worked for Federal Reserve Bank. I've built some secure systems. I know what it takes to deploy a system to production, what security measures to be taken. And there are a few experts in our group that bring those topics, you know, and some guys just roll their eyes and like, those guys again, boring us with security, you know, but they will thank us later. They will thank us later, you know, when it all goes smoothly and we don't have any issue, or hopefully we will, you know.
Well, if it were in my power, I would like to sit down with those people and try to explain to them, like, what the, you know, because what you guys are describing is a new type of villain in the crypto space. Now, we've already met a few of them, right? The Mount Gox guy, he was kind of a first comer to the you know, the super villain sort of space, where it's like, you know, people need to be reminded that people are not good. You know, like, if you leave them to their own devices, they will rob you blind, because, you know, we still have, you know, that you know, that instinct for self-preservation and, you know,
it's just a misaligned incentive structure. If you really think about it, that goes back to what we were talking about with the social networks, because it's just a misaligned incentive structure. Why people are bad is not because people are inherently bad. Technically, if I'm stuck out, like whenever I was like dirt poor, you know what I mean, as a kid coming up, like, you only have those thoughts or negative thoughts because of want or need. And desire. So if you align a scenario where most of what you want and need is provided for through the inflation of the system and the actions that you make on the system, then you have a much more, like, you know, integrated society. You have less like waste, you know what I mean?
But to Eugene's point, though, is like, he's talking about, because it's like, once you start talking about the money and put it in that context, then I can understand it, where it's
financial incentives are going to be
like,
huge.
If they could steal money or double spend, like, on the network, like, that's of course, those are going to outweigh what benefit they could do from doing things the right way. So,
and we also have to keep in mind, which we don't often discuss, but, you know, external attacks are pretty easy to, you know, to tackle this, takes, but we can get insiders too, right? This community have been, long enough, and it's a big community, and obviously we have to account for any kind of infiltration of, somebody with mail attempt who will have access to, possibly sensitive information about the launch, so that they could use against it if they stand to gain financially, right? So
I got you. So you're saying, Eugene, that there really could be a set number of Ethereum. For example, I'm just going to lay this out so the listeners can understand that you actually could have, like, guys who are large Ethereum holders who are posing as, EOS, supporters, who in some way are going to benefit from that failure financially. They're going to make a bunch of money if the price goes down for some reason.
Right.
But
so if, from my work experience, and, I know that most devastating attacks and hacks was done by insiders most often, at companies, at banks, mostly insiders.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There is no way to protect it. The only measures that you can take is to record every single action, so you can easily pinpoint whom that attack is coming from and recover from that attack, and obviously go after those people, right? So that's how it's done in industry usually.
And you touched on something there, and I was really, with my, dog whistle ear, like kind of tuning in on that other podcast that I was referring to in my head, where your project is very communocentric, if you'll allow me to make up a new word. It's very community oriented, and I'm getting that. Like I'm picking up that scent, but I would appreciate it if you would elaborate a little bit more about your focus as a group, right? Of why it is that what it is that you expect to benefit the whole thing through the power of community, and exactly what kind of community are you building over there?
So we, are multiple communities involved around EOS because it's such a multifaceted platform, right? It comes with, like, we are heavy on engineering and the launch and running BP operations, but then you have, it's almost a government in its own because it comes with a governance layer. There's a community involved with governance layer alone, where, like, I don't even have time to participate, right? Then you have a kind of like a judicial branch, which comes, where arbitration comes in, and that's a separate group. Then you have a, dApps and development group, right, which is building on top of this platform. So I'm, somewhat involved in that group as well. And so and then obviously, marketing, design, like, there's so many groups just to keep on top of just like a one area, like engineering alone, just to keep on top of everything what's going on Telegram. It's a full-time job, man, just full-time. Just like morning till night, you can.
And that's the thing, though, is that all of that stuff that you just, like having a judicial branch and having accountants and having developers and all that stuff, like those are all tribal elders. Is that an accurate way of?
No. Like EOS itself has an actual governance layer in Constitution, an actual governance mechanism that people vote to elect block producer candidates.
Right.
We have a block producer candidate on the EOS network who is attempting to get elected through people voting their stake, their coins, to elect us, to run transactions, to run a node, to validate transactions on the network. In that tier of block producers, there are supporting nodes, which are number 49, roughly. I mean, actually, it's on a sliding scale, but just for sake of semantics, like number 49 to number 22 in the ranking of block producers, they get less inflation than the top 21. The top 21 are actually creating blocks. They have the job of actually producing blocks, and that's why they call them block producers.
Well, let me explain also on a just simple use case, which I think is very close to every token holder. Let's say I have a friend who had about, let's say, 20,000 of market value stolen from here on Ethereum wallet through my Ether wallet hack that we all heard about. Hack. So when EOS goes live, what it means to have a governance layer and arbitration is the following. Let's say you had your EOS coins stolen, whatever amount, let's say it was stolen. You can file an arbitration case that will look at it, all transactions are in a clear on a blockchain. They will be able to actually take the action. Both accounts involved in a case will be frozen for 30 days while they consider a case. And if they see a proof that yes, it was stolen, they will give an order, a judgment, so to speak, to a BP group. And BP group in this case are basically like a super admins. They are as the executive branch. They can only act on a judgment, and majority of them have to agree, 15 out of 21. Well, and then what they do, they just roll back the transaction. They return funds back to its owner, and obviously whoever did, the hacking will be punished.
Well, you say whoever, so who is it? Who is whoever? Who is it that, like, how do you go about delegating the responsibility to review my case when I wrote you and I said, hey, my coins got stolen. I need somebody over on your end to review this. Or am I not understanding?
Empirical evidence, for one. I don't think that any case is going to be reviewed, or the likelihood of having like superfluous cases is a lot less, because so much data is empirical. You can see the actual transaction date and the timestamp and the actual you've ever seen like an ether scan where you can see the history of a transaction and when it went through and how many times it actually was validated or whatever. Like that's exactly the same thing that you have in EOS, because it's cryptocurrency, it's done in cryptography. So you actually have a record of that transaction, and you can go back and say, no, this person right here stole my Ether wallet this date when I did this because the DNS layer got taken over from, my Ether wallet. And, that's the date that it happened. Can you help me?
What is this?
For example, with my friend, that when he contacted me about this hack, I can see the transaction. I can see what tokens were transferred to which address, on which date. I can see all the evidence in front of me. It's clear and obvious, but nothing you can do about it. With Ethereum philosophy, the code is the law. So whatever happens, whatever code executes is the law, and you cannot basically do anything about it. With EOS, it's different. The code is not the law, because we all realize as software developers, code can have bugs. That's like, it happens. Shit happens, right? So with an example of distributed app or a wallet that you deploy, you write a contract, which will be a simple, maybe one-page contract, which explains what is the meaning, what it's supposed to do, what is its function, what it's supposed to do. And if something happens out of ordinary, like one of those Ethereum hacks when millions of whatever got lost through some, not even a hack, it was just some bug. Parity wallet, I think that's what it was. And guess what? It's too bad, right? But with arbitration, what they will be able to do, they will see the evidence. Okay, yeah, we lost like millions, and here's a contract. It wasn't obviously an intention of developers to to lose millions of token holders' money, and then they will be able to recover, right? So, and that's the meaning behind it, basically.
Okay, all right. Now, where can I buy this EOS token? Where is it?
Easiest way is probably exchange. I would recommend Binance. I've done I've done it on Binance.
Binance, KuCoin, Bittrex, I believe. No, Bittrex doesn't have EOS, does it?
Bittrex doesn't have, no.
Doesn't have it.
Binance,
Yeah.
Binance, it's pretty,
KuCoin,
easy to use. Then I would recommend you to transfer those tokens to your personal wallet. The EOS tribe have, I wrote a post which describes exactly the steps how to register your tokens, because I was getting those questions frequently, and it's not an easy, straightforward process. But
it's really no, and that's as we were talking about earlier. The normal human reaction to having to learn new technology is that there's 5 different types of wallets. You got a paper wallet, you got this kind, that kind, this kind. It's like, well, I don't know which one I want to do, and I don't know which one's the most secure, and I don't, and then you've got the problem of, well, which exchange do I buy it on, and how secure are they? And then you buy something off of Coinbase, and then you find out Coinbase is being indicted for insider trading, and then there's a lot of problems in there. But
it's like, that's the they just wheel something out every 6 months, don't they? Or every month or so, there's some big fiasco.
I don't understand it. It's like, listen, if you just go over and get the playbook from the SEC. They'll tell you everything you need to do to stay in the good graces of everybody. Those, as a licensed broker, it's like, yeah, I'm with you. I understand the anarchist utopia, but the fact is that we have rules and most of them are good.
And that's what's interesting about EOS, though, that I think if you're an institutional trader, then you actually could really appreciate EOS because it's a business blockchain. I mean, these shenanigans of what Eugene's trying to get to is you can't go build an enterprise business on a chain where like $100 million just evaporates and then they fork it and like they want to keep that. There's actually a group of people in that community that want to keep and give the hacker the money.
Yeah.
They want to fork it and say, no, the code is law, like give the hacker the money. And that, you're not going to build a solid business on that foundation.
No,
that's not it's not happening. Nobody with any significant amount of money or business chops is going to put money into that.
Right.
Here. So look at EOS as like an answer to that. As like literally, okay, if I had account recovery, if I had, like some replay protection, in the network where I could go through arbitration and get my money back if some shenanigans happen.
Right.
And I had the throughput and the transaction speed. I could actually transact, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 transactions a second. Well, I might build on a blockchain. Otherwise, it's a great, science experiment for the kiddies.
And another kind of point is, let's say with Ethereum, if any problem goes with any application, let's say CryptoKitties got hacked, right? And guess what? They have to, if they want to fix it, they have to fork the whole chain, which means if you run an application there, they say, hey, guess what? Those CryptoKitties, they got hacked, so we're taking everyone to a new chain now. And you're like, screw this, right?
Yeah.
With EOS, they're able to just freeze that particular application that got hacked, whatever, and deal with it separately without bugging everybody else. Everything else goes business as usual.
Code can be updated modularly. Like, think about that. Like, normally with like blockchain code, it's like static. I mean, that's what it does. You can like push tags and updates over time, but it's extremely slow moving. I mean, it does what it does, and largely the core functionality of like Bitcoin to this day hasn't like changed a massive amount. Like, there's been a ton of updates to the code, but what the code actually does is still pretty straightforward with its original intent. Whereas like you could change the number of BPs from 21 to 35. And you could change anything, any of the code or core functionality in EOS. You update the core code through a smart contract, through a voting mechanism, through worker proposals that are voted on in the community with the tokens.
Okay.
So that's a very elegant way to like self-service this machine so it can evolve. And if you as a token holder have real concerns about the number of block producers or the way that they're approving transactions or any number of things, you can actually vote on that. and like get a voice. And if you got enough people pissed off about it, they will change it.
Right.
That's pretty cool. Like, that's kind of cool, you know, like,
yeah.
You know, you don't.
I think, yeah, when you can incentivize, be it, you know, financially or otherwise, when you can incentivize the will of the people to act, then it solves a lot of problems, and it weeds out
money back. You get your arrow back as a trader. Tell me you don't love that. You get to vote and have a voice, and then you get your tokens back when you.
Right. I love that.
Perfect.
Now, what is it that's happening? Is it June 2nd? Or is it July?
June 1st is actually a snapshot of the final token snapshot happens June 1st.
What is it? What's happening that day?
So June 1st, let me explain. June 1st, a smart contract which is responsible for all token operations for EOS, you know, distribution, transfers, etc., will be frozen, which means you can't sell or buy EOS tokens. It's frozen, done, no transactions. Then they take a snapshot, which means they take a record of everyone's account and balance. And that snapshot will make it to a Genesis file. And Genesis file, it's like a seed for a blockchain, which means we start the blockchain out of this Genesis file. And all those records, all those accounts with balances will be established on a blockchain, which means, you know, your public key that you have, EOS, and you keep private key private, obviously, that will be preceded, and, you know, it will be up and running and available for you once blockchain is launched and, you know, voting.
It takes 15% of the total token supply to activate the chain. So up to 15% of all wallets. Now there's only about 50% of EOS registered. So with the potential for split votes and voter apathy, there are some concerns, but there is a portal being worked on. We're actually part of a group that's developing, you know, the voting portal. So that will be ready very, very shortly here in the next week or so for people to use. And they can pick the chain that they want, whatever chain, because there's going to be multiple chains. That's a whole other complicated thing that most people who are just speculators or investors are like, what do you mean multiple chains? There's just one EOS, right? Well, no, anybody can effectively fork you know, or deploy the GitHub and make their own chain and make some changes, which you have in sites like, or projects like Evolution OS, which is actually another variant of, you know, that has some changes in the token supply and allocation and how the chain is activated, but is more or less just EOS, you know, and that's going to happen. Like there's going to be, just know there's going to be probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 different flavors of EOS floating around that will probably consolidate down to just like 2 or 3 that are actually legit and have some uses. Evolution being one, there'll probably be another that rises from the fray of, you know, of the main chain. And then there'll be the main chain. And those other chains will effectively, like, you know, they'll have their own dApps and they'll have their own ecosystem and their own rules that are, you know, centric to that particular chain.
All right. Well, every time you say a sentence, my mind looks at 10 different variables. So I'm thinking that, what is there, 7 more months left in this year. I'm probably going to need about another 7 hours out of you guys over the course of the next 7 months so that we can get updates as a community and so that you can further explain what's going on to my dumbass. You know what I mean? Because all this stuff, it's like, I can kind of see it.
I understand why that's important, because when we say chains, right, multiple chains, we just mean that there's like miners, right? Block producers are miners. So just keep it simple. So you got like, now it's hardly not mining. It's completely different than mining, but let's just, for the sake of argument, call it that. You've got these like 21 miners, right, that are launching this chain. And then like 100 supporting nodes under them that are like waiting to be in that top 21 slot to get, but you know, to get paid, you know, to get the compensation, but only the top 50 of those gets any compensation, right? So, but it's a sliding scale. The top 21 get the lion's share. They get 25% of the total 25%, you know, paid from the inflation of the network. So in simple terms, if there's only a certain amount of tokens like in Bitcoin that get made, you know, that you can produce in blocks. So the miners are fighting to get to get that very first transaction head. And they're like they're pre-mining and front running like every 5 minutes on blocks to try to which drives up transaction fees, right? And it's not actually serving the network anymore. They're looking for that first head of the next block, and they're not looking out for the interests of the token holders. They're driving up transaction fees.
Right.
Hold on, let me finish what I'm saying. So if you look at that same paradigm, why block production and delegated proof of stake is such a more symbiotic relationship is because it puts, it balances that incentive model. Because I'll get voted out as a block producer, as a miner. I'll get voted out if I don't make transactions and follow the Constitution to the law. You know what I mean? On the EOS network. So then the other thing is with these other, to circle back to why I was talking about other chains, is that if there's 2 or 3 other chains, why you need to register your tokens and why that's so important is so you can actually go claim all those other tokens. If you go just register through Exodus or through an exchange and let them register your tokens, they may not actually, value or actually, validate
they won't grant you
transaction. Those actual tokens. They'll say, okay, we're going to give you EOS in this evolution, but these other 2 chains we don't support. But what really happens is they just keep it. You know what I mean? They still have access to it somewhere if they have the key.
You asked me if I know what you mean, and let me assure you, I know exactly what you mean. We used to call that getting burnt on the floor, and that's where, like, when if I was holding, I just got off the phone with my client, and he told me to sell out all of his, close out all of his futures contracts on gold. Well, I got to call the gold pit, right? And then I've got to deal with the gold pit traders, and I may get market price, I may not get market price. I might get shaved, right? And that's, and the problem with that is that there's nothing you can do about it. It's the market makers. You know what I mean? Like there's gaps in efficiency in that model. So like, as you were explaining that, it's like, oh, I kind of have an equivalent,
right. That's what you're really dealing with,
Yeah.
So I only explained the backstory of the incentive model with block producers, so you can have some context that it's very different than like traditional mining. So what we're attempting to do is provide, just like Eugene said, better security for the network, better throughput for new startups who are trying to scale, like the next Facebook or the next decentralized Twitter or whatever, and we want to be a part of that. That's like something so innovative that has all these crazy features like we just described. It's like, so, it's going to become the next wave of like the internet, or potentially influence part of society eventually, by having these governance mechanisms that, and I'll let Eugene, kind of extend on that vision.
Basically, I see it way more than just a technology. Technology is cool by itself, but what I see is we are building a digital democracy that can really become not just it's a digital democracy and economy 2 in 1. So we are basically building a foundation of future society that we will create this huge equalization factor among, all the people, take, borders out, central banks out. We can deal and trust each other directly. Anyone, anywhere in the world can deploy their smart applications, and it will be, it will be basically compensation based on your merits, not your birthrights, not your, what family you're from, etc. But it will create that big equalization factor for humanity, for the whole humanity.
Right. I like that vision. Guys, I appreciate you so much coming on today, and I will, you can rest assured I will be bugging you very shortly in the future to come back on the show and, sort of, turn the little dial on that microscope just a little bit so we can see just a little bit more clear, and then a little bit more clear, because that's what you're talking about is things that I've been noticing and have been talking about for months now on my podcast. It's like, look, this is all brand new stuff, and there's a lot of inefficiencies, right? We've got a long way to go, and there's any time where there's a shift, like a complete paradigm
shift. Yeah, an inflection point.
Yeah, really it's not easy. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. It never goes down smoothly, and it's it's a lot to get used to. You know what I mean? Like
you love that stuff as a trader. You love the vol.
Love it. I love it.
All burns down. You're like, yes. Like
it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see. It's like, dude, just like that kid in Germany. It's like, brother, 20, well, I don't know, 35 years ago, like the idea of just going into your living room and having a live conversation with somebody on the other side of the planet in real time for free was out of the question. It was out of the question. There was no, there was no futuristic device that you could look into and see the other person's face and talk to them in real time and see their expressions. And that was out of the question. And here we are. And it's like, for God's sake, Elon Musk just parked his car in space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's where we're at now. And so it's like, that's all wonderful and beautiful, but there's
they talked about this though, like Ray Kurzweil's talked about this singularity where like things will start to move so fast, surprise you. And like EOS is an example of that like where AI, pattern recognition libraries were just like 7-6 years ago. I remember vividly, looking at them and going, it's got a ways to go. And what they're doing now, I'm just like scared. I'm like, whoa, like
right.
A very short period of time that I've watched the technology evolve. That's what is happening. If you look at EOS, see it that way. All your viewers see EOS as an evolution of all these blockchain protocols, of them trying to figure out, okay, well, if we don't use proof of work, what could we use? Well, proof of stake. Well, proof of stake isn't ideal. What could we, delegated proof of stake? Okay, well, that can make things faster. Okay, well, and they just work through it for like the last 10, 12 years. Guys like, Dan Larimer, geniuses like Dan Larimer, and Vitalik Buterin, who have pushed different aspects of this forward. But Dan just was a little more ahead of the curve in terms of the transaction time. Not that like, Vitalik, because don't get me wrong, like there's some of the most brilliant computer scientists in the world active in the, Ethereum community. We in the EOS community do not disrespect or put down those of us who have any stripes. Respect people in the Ethereum community.
Well, I personally would like to see.
We have no problem with it, but it's just not going to scale though. We can't get away from that. Like you can't do things on chain and scale. You have to use off-chain scaling solutions, which then you're using trusted third parties at that point, and you're not even doing arguably like middlemen, you know what I mean? At that point, you're not even using a decentralized system anymore. So if we're talking decentralization, bare metal, independent guys, 21 guys across the globe that don't even really like hang out or know each other, might talk to each other in a chat. It's about the most collusion that you get. They're all in own operations, their own people. That's probably more decentralized than like 3 or 4 mining pools that still have say-so over the transactions. They still do. Like no one knows that, but these guys, these mining pools can stop transactions. They have ultimate power over, like, you know what I mean? Over the.
You're talking about you figured out a way to unify these people and bring some justice in, and bring some, like you said, a constitution.
Like 21 people versus like 3 mining pools, right? Would you rather have 21 independent organizations who can be voted in and out at any minute if they don't do their job, or would you rather have 3 or 4 mining pools dictating all transactions on your network, your quote unquote decentralized network? That sounds pretty centralized to me. I mean, like, hey, centralization is subjective, that's up for debate. If you trade off a little centralization, you know what I mean? And maybe there's only 21 block producers, but you can produce 1,000, 10,000 transactions per second. You know what I mean? Like that's some of the trade-offs you have to make in blockchain. So if the people out there, if you listen to Pete's show, and you listen to his advice on things to trade in, I would definitely say, EOS, there's a reason he's looking at EOS and talking about EOS so much lately.
Interesting. No, I like it. That's why I want to have you back on the show, is because as these things develop, it's like that.
You're a fundamental analysis guy. You actually look into this stuff yourself.
I do. And I look into the people, and I notice things like, I've made this statement several times before, like as a trader, right? There were, my clients trusted me, and there's a certain amount of importance that is, do I understand it as a trader? But even more important than that, right, to all of us, is can I explain it to you? Because if you don't understand it, then you're not going to participate in the trade, which means neither of us are going to get paid. You know what I mean? Right? So it's like that. So that's why it's actually more important that I be able to explain it than it is that I understand it to begin with. I mean, both are certainly necessary. And so when somebody comes on my show and talks to me in a way that I can understand, right, in a way that I can understand, you know what I mean? Because I've had developers, I've had people on my show tell me, not on air, right, like not on the broadcast, but tell me on my show, like, I don't want to explain it so that everybody can understand it, because if I did that, well then, you know, then the thing, this beautiful thing that I'm trying to build here, would just turn into a novelty. And it just blew my mind that this person said that, like, out loud. I'm like, dude, you won't be successful if nobody understands what you're selling. Nobody's going to buy it. That, you know what I mean? Like, so when people come, you know, like this conversation has been good for me because I've been present the whole time. At no point in this conversation did my eyes glaze over because I didn't understand what the hell you were saying. You know what I mean? Like,
try to keep it pretty, you know, simple, not too technical, but Eugene can
yeah. Well, I'll do technical, you know, like, because, you know, a lot of my fans, you know, have a much higher level of sophistication than I do when it comes to the actual technical side. And if they want a technical show, you know, me and Eugene, we'll just do a complete technical show, and we'll just do that for the fans. But you know, walking through life, I have to just I have to assume that everybody is just like me, where it's just like, yeah, this is all brand new stuff, and I didn't go to MIT. You know what I mean? I'm not a computer engineer, and I don't understand that. Like, I'm a money guy. You know, I understand money. I understand what motivates people to buy things, and you know, like an old saying, you know, in trading, it's like, I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can only tell you what the people's response to it is going to be, and that's going to be panic, because it's always the same. You know what I mean? Like, people panic buy and people panic sell, but either way, it's the same thing. It's like, you know, like when people see an opportunity and say, it's like, oh my God, I got to get a hold of that opportunity. It's like, well, that's panic, you know? And it's not that that's a bad thing, but that is what it is, you know? And so when it comes to the money, like, that's, you know, that's the voice that I speak with. And so being able to just reach out to people like you guys who are on the other end of the transaction, where it's like you're in the company, you're in the business, you're in the, you know, you know what writing code and all that stuff, you know, everything that goes along with what's happening right now in the technological sector. That's your expertise, and I have that ability, that lack of fear, where I can just sit down and just be like, hey dude, like, you know, like, if you say something that's over my head, I'm not going to sit here and try to sound sophisticated and try to pretend like I know, because, you know, I have to assume everybody's like me. So I'll stop you and be like, hold on a second now, hold on. Can you dumb that down a little bit? Can you make it, you know, accessible to me? Because by doing that, then I know that you're making it accessible to a lot of other people. And therefore, when they understand it, they're more likely, pardon me, they're more likely to part with their resources.
They all have to make it accessible, right? At a generally kind of, you know, digestible level. We can't keep it very technical. And, you know, me being, you know, kind of one of the meetup leader, I always look at the crowd I get, like, every time, and I adjust, right? The level of information that I give, I adjust. If, you know, if, like, whatever is, like, if I get developers, I get more technical. If I get just, you know, general crowd, I speak at a higher level. So
yeah, understandable. Yeah, and thank you guys so much for coming on, breaking that down for us. And I do sincerely hope that we're going to have you back on the show real soon to give us some updates, you some more breakdown of what's actually going on in the nuts and bolts of what you guys are doing over there.
Cool, cool.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
You bet.
Thanks.